Thank you. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
It is my distinct honor to recognize and introduce Dr. Brian Noland today. And first, I'd like to congratulate him because your star power has now achieved the level of Dennis Phillips coming to our Rotary meeting. Thank you. Congratulations, Dr. Noland. That's fantastic. Good to see you, Dennis. So as you all know, I'm all about milestones. The Rotary Club is about to celebrate its 100th year here in a couple of years. And if you did not know, Dr. Noland also is celebrating a milestone. This month, January 2022 is his 10th year, starting his 10th year as president at East Tennessee State University. So as you start this 10th year and finish out a decade, thank you for starting that with us in our Rotary Club. We feel like your dedication and presence of being in the community really speaks volumes to what you want to accomplish and what you already have accomplished. And he's been a transformative president, and you can read his bio and all the things that have happened. Essentially, just to highlight a couple of things, the largest capital project investment in the history of ETSU with renovation of the Culp Center and the Mary B. Martin Center and the Green Stadium. And that's just some of the top projects. There's many, many more. He's done a wonderful job at bringing the region together in these collaborative efforts to focus on rural health and childhood trauma and recovery and addiction. And we know that's something that's critical in our area. And he's allowing ETSU to be kind of at the forefront of making sure that we have groundbreaking things that happen in our community to move us forward. He's also a part of the Campaign for 125, again, a milestone. In 2037, the East Tennessee State University will be 125 years old, and he has done groundbreaking work to form committees and visionary strategies to really propel the university to be at the leading edge of many, many things. So we're very thankful you are here today. Personally, I thank you for your dedication and your presence and your support of the Roan Scholar Program. That's how I have been such an integral part of being involved at ETSU, and I know many of you all have a strong place in your heart for ETSU as well. And hey, what about a great football season, right? That makes everyone like everyone more when you have a good football season. So without further ado, thank you, Dr. Brian Noland.
Thank you, and to everyone, thanks and good afternoon. I want to maybe use the theme of history to set a stage for some comments, do a little bit of retrospective on the year that has been, but then also look forward to what's on the horizon. You know, it doesn't seem possible that it's January. I'm still writing 21 on my notes and having to correct it to 22. It's amazing how quickly time flies. I see that passage of time every time I look at my son. When my wife and I and our family moved here in January of 2012, my son was in the first grade, and now he's in the 11th grade, and we're looking at colleges and trying to figure out what comes next. He went from this little kid about this tall who slept with regular hours to a young man who thinks he's taller than me, may actually be, but I won't admit it. And it happens quick. But as you look at things that happen quickly, we all realize that there's a lot of work that's gone in to those results. And we as an institution have had a significant number of accomplishments in the past year. But those accomplishments have been made possible because the foundational roots that many of you in this room planted, members of the first Roan Scholars class. Now we see more Roan Scholars moving in potentially this next year than any period in the history of the university. And alum after alum who played leadership roles in the community can trace the roots back to the seeds that you planted. Elements at the institution, such as football, more wins than at any season in the history of the university. Where did those roots trace their seeds? Regent Montgomery and his service on the Board of Regents when we brought that vote before the board 8 years ago to have football, and that passed. So as we look at the things that we're celebrating now, I want to remind everyone that the reason we're celebrating is because of the sacrifices and investments of those who came before us. So I want to take you back in time, and then we're going to come forward to the future. The university celebrated its 110th anniversary on October 10th of this year. On October 10th in 1911, our founding president, Sidney Gilbreth, stood on the foot of the building that now bears his name and talked about the institution. the importance of the university, and the role that it would play within this region. And 110 years ago, he gave us our mission, a mission to improve the quality of life for the people of this region. And that mission hasn't changed over the course of the past 110 years. What has changed is that the university has become more complex. We began as a teachers college, one of 3 teachers colleges in the state, East, Middle Tennessee State University, and the University of Memphis. We brought people in on horseback so that they could learn about the innovative pedagogical techniques at the university school. But from those humble roots as a teachers college, what has emerged is a university that, in my opinion, is the land-grant institution for Central Appalachia, a university that touches every facet of your life, even though you may not realize it. For those of you who have children or grandchildren who are in elementary school, I guarantee you half the teachers in their school were trained at ETSU. For those of you who work in the healthcare practice, you probably received your degree from ETSU, but I guarantee you the majority of your staff did, because 75% of all the healthcare practitioners in our region graduated from our university. And from Holston Valley to Indian Path to JCMC to Bristol, those hospitals are run by the alum of our university. You're not going to find a major business in this area that isn't run by alum of the university. And you see that impact in statistics. If you were to draw a 30-mile circle around my office, 80% of the people with a baccalaureate degree in that 30-mile circle graduated from ETSU. So sometimes in our region, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about regionalism, you know, my father's family is from Ireland, and I understand how mountains and hollers and connections can connect people and separate people. My dad's family moved to Asheville, North Carolina in the late 1800s, and my dad spent the bulk of his life there. He lived in DC for a little bit, came back to Asheville, and is buried in the same cemetery my grandfather's buried. My mom lives in Asheville now. But when we look at this region, quite often as a region, we look at, well, how does it impact Kingsport or Greenville or Bristol or Johnson City? We don't really look at how things impact regions as a whole. And that's what I think ETSU does. ETSU isn't Johnson City's university. ETSU isn't Kingsport's university. ETSU isn't Sevierville's university. We have branch campuses in all 3 of those communities. We're the region's university. We're the connector that brings all of the elements of our region together. And as I look back at what has transpired over the course of the past decade, I think as a region, we've done a nice job of setting the seeds for what comes next. But I think what comes next is our ability as a region to speak, to talk, to act, and to move with one voice. Every time I go to Nashville, I see what is quickly becoming the tree of Nashville. If Nashville had a tree, it'd be a crane. If you got in a helicopter and flew around our region, do you see a crane anywhere? I'm not saying cranes are the be-all, end-all development and growth. There's not a lot of development and growth that's happening in our region. And I think it's time for us as a region and for us as a university to step forward and help to lead some of those developments. One of the things that we have done very quietly over the past year, and a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today are contained within those yellow books in front of you, which is the annual report for the university for 2021, is the institution has created a research corporation. We're a major research university. We're an R2 in the classifications. We do about $50 million a year worth of externally sponsored research, but much of that research is inward focused. And through the creation of our research corporation, we're wanting to build connections between our faculty and staff and employers across the region so that we can bring our skills to bear to help solve the region's problems, to help grow our economy. An individual whose name is very familiar to you, David Golden, is the president and CEO of that entity. And that entity over the course of the past year has really played a key role in helping a lot of small businesses with startup activities. We're getting ready to start a new activity here in Kingsport. It will launch in the spring quarter of this year. It's a program called Strive, in which we're going to work with veterans who want to start small businesses and to partner those veterans with angel funding and with skills coaches who help them take their idea from idea to fruition to implementation. But our research corporation is going to hopefully begin to play also a much more aggressive role in promoting the assets that we have in this region, so that maybe a decade from now, we can look back and say, this was the decade in which we as a region collectively moved forward and began to develop, to grow, and to expand business and industry. You know, as we look at some things that are happening on campus, talked a little bit about football. This was a milestone year for football program, most wins in the history of the institution. But when I think about football, football for me isn't really about a sport. Football for me is more a story of belief. Y'all are aware of the history of ETSU football. Most significant season was 1969, Grantland Rice Bowl, beat Terry Bradshaw. We talked about it since 1969. Football had its ebbs and flows. 1996, we played Villanova in the playoffs. But then in the early 2000s, the program went away. And for the longest time, we didn't have football. I became president, and the only question folks wanted to ask me was what we were going to do about a football team. We've had football for 7 seasons. There was a young man on our team this year who played his 8th season of football. Because of COVID and red shirts and injuries, we had a young man named Polks who played longer as an individual playing football than we've been playing football. But in 7 short years, we went from not owning a helmet, not owning a football, not owning shoulder pads, to beginning by playing on an intramural field, to then playing at Science Hill, to then building Green Stadium, to now having the most wins in the history of the university. That's the power of belief. It's the power of something that may altogether seem impossible, but if you set a big goal, sometimes you might actually achieve that goal. But it's also more than a belief in football. It was a dream of a marching band, because 8 years ago, we didn't own a tuba. This year, we had the largest marching band in the history of the university. And we took what was an albatross of a facility, the Dome, and turned that into an entity that was home for Bands of America. For the second time in a few years, brought hundreds of marching bands from across the region here to the Tri-Cities. So sometimes when you look at ideas that may not altogether seem possible, starting a football program, whoever would have thought 7 years later, we're in the second round of the playoffs, and we've won more games than at any point in the history of the institution. So that may be the thing that when people look back at 21, for them is the high water mark for the year. But for me, that's not the high water mark. The high water mark for the year is the ability of our institution, our students, and this community as a whole to continue to move forward, to navigate the complexities of COVID and stay focused on our mission. In a year in which we pivoted all of our classes to remote, in a year in which there were no major activities on campus, in a year in which we lived through things that many of us thought we would never live through, we stayed focused on our mission, which is student success. We had the highest graduation rate in the history of the university in the face of COVID. We had the highest retention rate in the history of the university in the face of COVID. We had the highest percentage increase of a freshman class of any university in the state of Tennessee this fall in the face of COVID. And what's that a testament to? The people in this room, because you've sent your grandchildren to the university, be it at undergrad or at med school. You've not given up on the university, even at certain points when things all around us seemed like they were falling apart. When parents and families were struggling with learning outcomes, our students at ETSU and the Clemmer College of Education rolled up their sleeves and volunteered and did tutoring and mentoring and after-school work to help kids with learning loss. When there were nursing shortages in the hospital, our nursing students stepped forward and filled vacancies in the hospital. We're going to need to do that again here in the next few weeks, but we help to cover, because that's what this region does. Well, as much as sometimes we let Friday night football get in the way of progress, when push comes to shove, we find a way to work together. I know we all are tired of COVID, but I implore you to continue to do the things to keep you and your family safe, because the next few weeks are going to be difficult. The next few weeks are going to be as difficult as this time last year. So if you have neighbors who have yet to get vaccinated, please encourage them to do so. If you've not had your booster shot, please get your booster shot. I've had all 3 shots. If someone wants to give me a 4th, sign me up. I'll take it right now. But if we can get through the next couple of months, which we will, I cannot describe the level of excitement that I have about what's on the horizon. Not only what's on the horizon for ETSU, but what's on the horizon for the region as a whole. As we look downstream within the legislative session that will begin in a couple of months, we have the opportunity on campus for a couple of major investments in buildings and renovations. For those of you who went to the university and graduated any time after 1969, you probably took chemistry classes in Brown Hall. Brown Hall looks the same now as it did in 1969. We are the #1 capital project in the state of Tennessee to renovate that building, which will be the first renovation of our biology and chemistry spaces since that building was built. Why is that important? Because we're the leading producer of nurses in the state of Tennessee. We have the largest college of nursing in the state of Tennessee, top 25 ranked college of public health in the state of Tennessee, in the nation, top 10 college of medicine for rural and family practice in the nation. And you can't continue that academic success if you don't have a core infrastructure for biology and chemistry. For those of you who remember the university and maybe graduated in the 50s or 60s, the old University Center building, what was the Student Center? We're going to take that building to the ground and build a new academic classroom building in that space. All of that is working its way through the legislative process. And then the final aspect relates to the Gatton College of Pharmacy, the only privately funded college of pharmacy on a public campus in the nation. We're hoping that this will be the year that we receive state support for that entity. As we look downstream towards the fall, we're excited about what we're seeing in terms of our freshman class. Really cannot say enough to thank our partners in Kingsport, particularly at Dobbins-Bennett. Last year, we had more students in our freshman class from DB than any other high school in the state. And we're looking to grow our freshman class north of 2,100 students. As I mentioned, this year, we had the largest percentage increase in freshman class of any university in the state of Tennessee. So as we look forward to the future, we're looking forward to our 125th anniversary. And we're asking questions to the community. What can your university do to help meet your needs? Over the course of the past 6 months, I've met with 120 different employer roundtables, both large and small. I've met with superintendents, I've met with principals, I've met with healthcare leaders, asking questions. What would you like to see your university do in the next 10 to 15 years? I think you're going to see us really spend a lot of time in the remainder of this decade focused on fully building out our engineering program. You're going to see us look to add a couple of additional programs in the health sciences. There's a lot of conversation here in Kingsport about dentistry and a dental school. There are significant dental needs in our region. Anytime the primary dental care services for the underprivileged is a RAM clinic, you've got a problem. But RAM clinics are the primary source of dental care for many in our region. So we're working collectively with UT about building a 4th-year rotational cycle clinic here. But ultimately, we still have the same dream that the mayor and I had 8 years ago when we got on the plane and flew down to Memphis, which is to have a dental school at East Tennessee State University. That may seem like a big stretch and a big dream, and it may be unrealistic. But 8 years ago, folks thought it was a big stretch and a big dream to have a football team at the university. And now we're conference champions. Talk just a couple bit about athletics because things are in that field. We play VMI tonight in basketball. The team is going through a little bit of a rebuilding and transition process, but we're still right where we need to be. I had the great honor of being at the University of Georgia on the 22nd of December as we beat Georgia down there. And just a little bit of a side note, my language is going to be a little colorful here in a second, but my dad went to the University of Georgia, and my youngest football memory was watching Georgia football and driving down to Georgia after they won the national championship with Herschel Walker. So there's a little spot in me that's always liked Georgia football. So when we're down getting ready for the game, Mike Gatton, who used to be the coach here, gave us a tour of Georgia's new practice facility, their weight rooms, and all the things that power Georgia football. And there was this room off to the side where graduate assistants were putting together the planning notebooks for the game against Michigan. And they had 5 principles that they wanted to accomplish in that game. And as the group went around, I saw what it was, and I took a quick picture of the notebook with my phone because I was curious what those priorities were. It was too far away for me to see, but when I got home and zoomed in on my phone, I saw what it was. And as I watched the Michigan game the other night, I knew that they got their first priority, which was a good old-fashioned physical ass whooping. That's what it said. The #1 priority. Not block, not tackle, not anything else. Good old-fashioned physical ass whooping. That's what we gave to Georgia basketball on the 22nd of December, which was a lot of fun because it was my birthday. And I told Coach We played basketball on my birthday every single year we've been here and never won. In fact, we lost to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville at home in Freedom Hall by 2 points on my birthday. So that was a wonderful night. But basketball plays VMI tonight. So for those of you who've not had a chance to watch the Bucks, Coach Desmond Oliver, our new head coach, is doing an outstanding job. We take on VMI tonight. We've got Wofford on Saturday. Our women's teams games this weekend have been postponed because of COVID, which I fear is going to cycle through the season a little bit. But if you've not had a chance to come watch the men's team, it's an outstanding team. They get up and down the floor, they run, they press. Have a home game tonight and a home game on Saturday. We're going to blink in a few short months and it'll be spring practice. Got a new head football coach, Coach Quarles, comes to us from Furman. Before Furman, he built Maryville. That whole machine and all those state championships is his. And a sign of the connections and power of family in our region, we sometimes forget how connected our region is. He's from Jefferson County. He went to Jefferson County High School. His father's an educator. His father taught at Jefferson County High School for a long time. So at the press conference, I'd go over and ask his father a few questions, and he gave me the ranges in time when he taught at Jefferson County High School. And I said, well, this is a stretch, but by chance, do you know a gentleman named Shawn White? He goes, well, of course I know Shawn White. Shawn White graduated in 1989. He's now a minister at the Presbyterian Church down in Knoxville. I still keep in touch with him. I said, well, that's my cousin. His wife's ears perked up, and he goes, so you're related to Amy White? And I said, yes, that's my aunt. And she goes, she was one of my closest friends, and she talked to me about attending her funeral. So here's, my aunt passed away about 15 years ago of cancer. So two people I've never met in my life before. I just hired their son to be our football coach. And I learned that his mother, one of her closest friends, was my aunt. That's the beauty of our region. In one short connection, you've made a connection with someone that's family. So as we look at 22 in the year to come, how can we build connections from Kingsport to Johnson City to Greenville to Bristol that allow this region to speak with one voice, to recruit business and industry here with one voice, so that 30 years from now, our children and grandchildren have the same opportunities that have been afforded to us. That's my dream for this year. And to win a Southern Conference championship in basketball, which is my dream every single year. But I thank you for the chance to be here. As you can tell, I had some notes, but I left them over there on the podium. So thank you all for dealing with me as I've kind of rambled on a little bit. I'm getting ready to start my 11th year as president of the university next week. Past 10 years have been the greatest honor of my life to serve this institution, to serve this people, and to serve this region. Sometimes we take those things closest to us for granted. We take for granted that we're an institution that has the #1 ranked military science program in the state, top 25 college of public health, largest college of nursing in the state of Tennessee, #1 computer science program in the state of Tennessee is on our campus, not Vanderbilt or Knoxville's campus. An institution that has made larger percentage increases in student success than any other university in the state. But an institution that also goes about serving and doing the little things. The work that we've done collectively in healthcare in this region is beyond description. I hope that this is a year in which we can put COVID in the past. We can put all the things that have divided our country in the past, and we can look collectively at how this region moves forward. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I know we're bumping up against time, but I'd take a question or two if you have them. But thank you all. Any questions?
Could you tell the group a little bit about the uniqueness of having an esports team and how successful they've been, which is
Esports team.
a whole different realm of where we go with colleges.
It's a whole, correct. It's a whole, so how did you learn about our esports program?
I'm an ETSU graduate and I'm in Parks and Recreation, and that's what we do. Yeah.
So ETSU graduate, Parks and Recreation, that's what we do. Esports. I've got to admit, I did not understand the full complexity of esports and the popularity of esports. We have a young man who we signed on our League of Legends team this past fall, who is one of the most accomplished League of Legends players in the nation. We probably had more people watch our esports teams compete than watched us play North Dakota State in football. Our esports team has finished in the top 25 in League of Legends, and drawn a blank on the other sport that we compete against. But there's two things through which we compete. We scholarship our student athletes in esports,
You might want to explain what it is.
and we built an arena for them. So in the Colt, which has been completely renovated, we've got a large screen television that's about the size of this room if you stood it on end. And we've got an arena where folks come watch these kids compete against other colleges in competitive video games. And we're nationally ranked in esports at East Tennessee State University. We scholarship students in this space. We've got a coach for our esports team, the same way Desmond Oliver coaches our men's basketball team. This is an emerging space, and it's an area in which if you're looking for something to watch on television after the Super Bowl, you're going to have the ability to watch esports and to watch people compete against one another in video game space. But it may sound unique, but it's not to my son's generation. To my son's generation, he's more interested about what is happening in this competitive gaming space than he is with what's happening in the NFL. And in that space, not only are we competitive, but we have facilities that few other institutions of our size have.
Yeah, Dr. Noland, I really want to congratulate you on what you've done. I want to say that I'm just now spending 56th year of being a doctor in this region, all in time in this region. I remember when we started the medical school, and we had to do that. And look where we have gotten. My medical group had so many practitioners that graduated from over there in medical school. Got a grandson now graduating over there in medical school. We'll start the Miller Medical Society again before long. But I want to say, please, where are we on the dental school? That would be my #1 goal if I were with you and so forth, because the deficiencies in providers and the difficulty with dental care in this area and across the country is just unbelievable. But we really need to have a career of dentistry at ETSU.
But I first want to start by thanking you for the leadership that you provided in the healthcare environment in this region for decades. Thanks for the support that you've provided to Quillen, and I know your grandson's a third year at Quillen now. I want to give you a data point about Quillen to give you a sense of how competitive it is to get into med school at ETSU. This year, we will have 3,300 people apply to med school at ETSU. We will take 78. We'd like to grow that class to 100. To grow the class to 100, we've got to do a little bit of addition onto the building, but that's how competitive it is to get into Quillen. Quillen transformed healthcare in this region. Why do we have subspecialty care? Quillen. Why do we have the level of trauma care in this region? Quillen. Why do we have the level of cancer care in this region? Quillen. Why do we have the level of cardiology care in this region? Quillen. I've got a family member who lives here in Kingsport. His mom works at Eastman. His father's an engineer. He's 2. Day after Christmas, he was in Children's Hospital because he'd broken his femur. And when you're a 2-year-old and break your femur, that's a mess. But the cast that you're in from here down to your ankles is even more a mess for the family for the next 6 weeks. But they had that care provided here in our region. They didn't have to go to Knoxville. They didn't have to go to Asheville. Why? Quillen. Dental school could do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Biggest challenge with the dental school is it's $70 million up front. And then the operating costs downstream for dental school are more expensive than a med school. So the need is unquestionable. The challenge has been for the entire 10 years that I've been here and for the 15 years that Paul Stanton was here, 25 years combined, it's finding the political wherewithal to make the investment to fund a college. We're going to continue to push. It's probably a long stream game, but if we can get a clinic here, then at least that gives us a foothold to then go back and look at maybe partnering with UT or going in a standalone manner. There was a question in the back.
I came through university in the late 60s, early 70s at the University of Virginia during a time when there was a lot of disruption through war protests and so on. And of course, we've seen some things similar in the last couple of years. what do you see, what keeps you up at night as far as what could become a disruption to both ETSU and universities in general?
I think two things. First, short term is COVID. The disruption that has transpired over the past 2 years in my industry is unlike anything that's been faced in the industry since the late 1960s, because you had three elements moving at once. You had the disruption of COVID, all of the learning loss, time away, the mental health crisis. You can't even begin to wrap your head around the challenges that we're facing in that space. Then you had the economic downturn, then you had social unrest, and you had all three moving at the same time. For the next 2 months, it's COVID. We bring 2,600 students back into the residence halls in a week. And I cannot require masks. I cannot require vaccination. All the tools that are at my disposal to fight COVID, I cannot use. So I'm worried about the health and safety of our students. I know today that there are 380 staff members at Ballard who are out because they tested positive with COVID. In 2 short weeks out of ETSU, with faculty out, staff out, I don't have the ability to feed, care, and educate students because my campus is sick. That's a significant concern. But then as we look downstream, there are waves of unrest. That's a cycle of life. In any generation, there are waves of unrest. I look at the unrest that has transpired in some respects as energizing. For the longest time, we lived in a country that was politically apathetic. Folks didn't vote and they didn't pay attention. People are now paying attention. The challenge is they're not listening to one another. And one of the beauties that occurs at a university is it's an opportunity for diverse voices from diverse backgrounds, from diverse perspectives, to all sit together and have the chance, if it goes right, to listen. My fear is because everyone has spent 2 years on their phones that they've forgotten how to listen and they hide behind a screen. So I'm concerned there, but that's a cycle of life. This stuff moves. My biggest concern short term is what we could face in the next month as we're trying to get school started with COVID. That and how we're going to stop the big center and power forward that Chattanooga has, because they wore us out last week when we played down there in Chattanooga. But I'm bumping up against time. I sense the hook to the right. Thank you all. My email address is really simple. It's president@etsu.edu. But you see me in the community, you see me at games, you see me in the high schools. Please stop. If you've got an idea, if you've got a thought, if you have something you'd like to see the university do, please let me know. And if you see us getting ready to make a mistake, please let us know as well. But thank you all for all that you do for the region and for our university. Everybody have a happy new year.
Thank you so much. What an incredible program. And to show you our appreciation, we just wanted to make a donation in your name to this year's signature project, which is a kiosk at our Veterans Memorial. Thank you so very much for being with us. Also, I would like to thank